Hey everybody, Erica Heron here, and today I wanted to address something that I see come up a lot on my toddler and older sleep Q&A Facebook group, and that is questions about when you should transition your kid to a toddler bed. Everybody has different feelings about this. Some are really excited because you can get a cool new bed. I mean, they make crazy beds now, ones with slides and playhouses underneath. Some people, like me, want to avoid this transition as long as possible because they know that with this new independent step, other independent behaviors can emerge as well. But a lot of people seek guidance on this and want, just a little bit of an answer on when is a good time to switch. So I wanted to talk about that today. So how do you know that it's time to switch? One way that can tell you it's time to switch is if your child is starting to crawl out of the crib. Obviously, that is a safety issue. And at the point that they're doing that on a regular basis, unfortunately, it is time to switch. Now, I don't actually recommend that you make the switch the first time that they do it. Some parents are like, oh, well, they crawled out of their crib and now I have no choice. Tomorrow we have to get a new bed. That's really not the case. What I actually suggest if you have a child who is just starting to crawl out of their crib is that you watch on the monitor. This is even better if you have a two-way monitor where you can talk through it. But even if you don't, even if you're just watching on the monitor and then speaking through the bedroom door, but wait for them to start climbing out. And then as soon as they do, very firmly say, no, you need to stay in your bed. If they keep trying to climb out of the bed, even after you say that, then you can go in and silently just help them down and back into their bed. But a lot of times that firm no will scare them just a little bit. I know with my son, I said, no, that isn't safe. You have to stay in your bed. And he's actually a pretty stubborn kid, and it worked for him because he, doesn't want to get hurt, and understood that if I was saying that he might get hurt, that he might in fact get hurt doing that. And we haven't had him try to crawl out yet. My son's really tall, so if we had switched to a toddler bed when he was able to crawl out, he would have been not even 2. So I'm really glad that that worked. Another benefit of the two-way monitor, if you're using that to tell them to stay in the bed, is they might not even know that it's you telling them to stay in their own bed. Kind of a funny story. A friend of mine, her son crawled out and she did the thing where she said, no, you have to stay in your bed, and he got back in his bed. Well, next day he told on the guy from the monitor, who he didn't realize was his mom, and said, that guy says I gotta stay in bed. So kind of funny. They might just think it's some other authority figure telling them that they have to stay in bed. Let's see. Another way to delay the transition to a toddler bed: make it harder for them to crawl out. So if you have crib bumpers and they're starting to stand on those and say, hey, that's a way I could get out of my bed, this is a great time to take those out. We don't want to give them a step out of their crib. A sleep sack is a really great way to keep them from climbing. Obviously, it's a little more difficult to climb if your feet are in a sleep sack. My son still sleeps in a sleep sack. They make them in very big sizes, and it's, like I said, it's worked great for us. Another thing in delaying is that if you can set the crib as low as it goes, make sure that your crib is on that low setting, just to make it, again, more difficult for them to climb out. Another don't. Don't assume that switching out of a crib is going to solve your little one's sleep troubles. It's probably not going to. In fact, what usually happens if you have a child who is having sleep troubles in a crib is that, unfortunately, they just get worse when you move to a bed. So I highly recommend that you teach your child to sleep in their crib before you even consider that move to the bed. And if you are starting to notice, hey, my child's getting bigger and they might, be ready to move to a toddler bed soon, then here's your chance. Really take the opportunity to teach them to sleep in their bed while it's their crib, so that transition will be easier. Another don't transition your child to a toddler bed just because you have a new baby coming. Obviously, sometimes that has to happen. But something to consider is that a lot of times babies are sleeping in a bassinet for, the first 6 months or so of their lives anyway, and don't actually need that crib yet. So I suggest that if you have a new baby coming and you are going to transition your older one to a bigger bed, that you do it, at least a few months before the baby comes or a few months after the new baby comes. The reason for that is because your child's already going to feel, a bit of a sense of loss of some things and some changes when the new baby comes. And you don't want to increase that with, also losing their bed and the place that they remember always sleeping. So, remember, your sleep is going to suffer enough already with a newborn baby. So if you can keep your older one sleeping well, I think that'll be really beneficial. Another point about the transition to the toddler bed, or how to know when it's a good time. You don't have to do it until you have to do it. Hope that makes sense. Don't feel like just because your child is 2 that it's ridiculous that they're sleeping in a crib. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being 3 sleeping in a crib. I highly recommend that you wait until at least 3 if you can. Kids under that age just often don't have the developmental capacity to understand that they need to stay in their bed at night. So the older they are, the better understanding they will have, and the more tips and tricks you can use to help them stay in their bed because they understand things better. So the longer you can wait, the better. But you don't have to do it, by a certain age. Don't feel any of that pressure. Your child is happy in your crib and they're still comfortable, leave them in the crib. Last but not least, one more point about how to know when it's time to move your child to a toddler bed. At some point, your child will outgrow the crib. So while that's probably not at age 2, it is going to happen eventually. Some ways that your child has outgrown the crib. First of all, they look too big to get comfortable in it at this point. They're moving around, they're hitting the edges all the time, they're just not able to settle. If they are getting so big that it's hard for you to lift them in and out of the crib, that can be another sign that you're ready to make that transition. You don't want to be putting your back out, putting your large toddler or older child in a crib every night and taking them out. And then another reason that you might be ready to move your little one to a toddler bed is toilet training. So I know I've mentioned before that lots of kids don't master nighttime dryness until they're much older than the age that they start potty training anyway, maybe even 4 or 5. They just don't have the bladder capacity to do that. But at a certain point, they're going to want to get out of bed and use the toilet. And at that point, you're not going to have them crawling out of a crib to do so. So just a little bit of a recap. How do you know it's time? Your child's climbing out of the crib on a consistent basis and saying stop isn't working. Your child is starting to outgrow the crib, or your child is toilet training. Some don'ts. Don't transition the very first time that your child crawls out. Try the other tactics that I said first. Try to delay it by making it harder to crawl out of the crib with sleep sacks and removing sleep sacks and large stuffed animals that they could use to step on. Don't assume that moving to a toddler bed is going to fix your sleep problems. Don't transition your child right when a new sibling is born. And that's it. Next week, I am going to talk a little bit more about toddler beds. I'm going to talk about kind of how to make that transition as easy as possible, and then also some things that you should expect when you transition your child to a toddler bed. Thank you for tuning in. I hope it was helpful. If it was, please leave your comments below. Thanks.